and welcome to the Salesloft and Sales Confidence first webinar of 2021. Just to let you know, my name is James Ski. I'm the founder of Sales Confidence, and I'm super happy actually. Ollie Sharpe, VP of Revenue at Salesloft, is going to be taking on the host mantle today. So my job is simply to be responsible for the technology behind the scenes, introduce everybody to kick off this event, and then I'm also going to be joining this panel. Okay, so hopefully those of you joining, thank you very much for getting involved. As we highlighted, this event is for sales and marketing leaders or any sales professionals responsible for driving growth this year. And we're focused on taking the 7 biggest takeaways from 2020 that we've moved on with and look forward into 2021. I just want to thank Kelly Walters, the UK marketing manager for Salesloft, who got this all out in your feeds. So well done, Kelly. Sales Confidence, we're building the world's most valuable B2B sales community, and we care about helping people at each stage of their career with their mindset, performance, and well-being. And we've been working with Salesloft over the 2 years since they've been in London. And Salesloft is granted as the world's #1 sales enablement platform, helping sales teams drive pipeline. So Ollie and the team have had an incredible run since 2 years ago, landing here in London. The team's almost 25 plus people, and I'm looking forward to introducing the panel guest today and then handing over to Ollie Sharpe. So first up on the panel today, we've got Alex King. And Alex King is an experienced revenue leader that's grown sales and marketing teams at different stages of SaaS companies. And especially for those demand generation and marketing folks on the call today, Alex has got some real expertise across both sales and marketing, and he's recently joined as the VP of Revenue for Rotageek, which is a VC-backed workforce management company. Give us a wave, Alex.
Hey, James.
Welcome. Next up, we've got Alfie Marsh. Now, you wouldn't believe this. He's dialing in all the way from California to kick off our event today. Alfie joined Spendesk, which is a spend management platform, as the 20th employee, helped build out the sales operations in the UK, and then was shipped over to California to now be the head of US sales. The company's grown over 300%. There's over 250 employees, and he's a serious data geek. So he's going to give us some real insights on the data that he loves to play with over in California. And then the final panelist is Ellie Twigger. If you've not checked her out online, go check out her amazing videos. She's a leading SDR within the Salesloft team. And what's fantastic about her, she's also got experience as an AE, and she opted to get back hands-on as an SDR to help drive the growth of Salesloft. And then finally, not least, Ollie, who's taking over as the host, who's going to be interviewing us all today. Over 20 years of sales management experience, 10 years building successful teams at LinkedIn, and he's had an incredible run building out the team at Salesloft. So Ollie, that's me, peace out. I'll hand over to you, I'm in the panel now.
Thank you, James. It's great to be in control of James because he normally leaves me no time to speak. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to leave him 1 minute at the end. But thank you, everybody, for joining. It's great to see so many people's countries coming up on the right-hand side. We've got a complete range. So thank you for joining us. When we start talking about this webinar, we wanted to really look at the learnings, not how to work in the COVID world and all of those, because I think there's enough of that online. But in my view, what I feel is that there was developments happening in the sales industry, the sales space, that have maybe been accelerated due to the current pandemic and the situation. And some of these are for the good. And I think that the things that I saw already rearing their heads that maybe have been accelerated are things like the work-life balance of professionals as a whole, and maybe the work-life blend rather than balance. Them caring for the mental well-being of our team. They've become more prominent than they were before, but they'd already started, so it's just speeded it up. Also, we've all become internal salespeople. So this move to what can be internal, we now know. We know we can work internally. And we've seen a massive need for tech to help with the sales process, with coaching and everything, which again had already started. but it's also impacted the way we sell. So I think that a lot of people really saw the difference from 10 years ago, if you're old enough like me, where it was a different environment, sales was different. It was becoming more about standing out, providing a better buyer experience, and building trust. And I think those again have been amplified and accelerated by the current situation. So what we wanted to really look at here is, let's look at the positives. Let's look at what the last year or so has impacted within of how we've had to work, and what we can take forward from that, and whether hopefully it finishes soon, all of the crap we're going through, but when it does, what will we take forward? And that's what we're going to concentrate on today. So our learnings from the last year. So I'm going to start with Alex. And Alex, so let's start with, we're going to ask for 2 each. But Alex, what's the first thing that you said that you've learned over the last 12 months or so that you will take forward with you?
Yeah, so I think the first thing is like making every lead count. And I mean, this has always been true, right? But I think because everyone else then focused on it in 2020, it became so much more important. So there were 3 things actually we did to make sure every lead counted. So we created different types of leads. We then had a cadence for each one of those types of leads. And then we tried different ways of engaging with people. So the first thing about creating those different types of leads, we looked at really what our sales funnel looked like. So we had top of funnel, middle funnel, bottom of funnel. And the goal was to try and harvest those leads, which allowed us to engage with people before they started to speak with our competition to build the narrative. And then each one of those leads had a cadence, which was designed based around the intent. So for top of funnel, it was less intense. For bottom of funnel, it was more intense. And then obviously the cadence itself, we were investing time and money in marketing campaigns, so they needed to be properly managed and followed up. So that cadence provided that sort of framework, but then also the data points so we could look to improve going further forward.
And can you give us a real life example of what you mean? It's easier for us to understand when we get the examples. Give us an example of what you mean by that. Yeah,
so like a basic one is like demo requests. We had an internal SLA of 5 minutes to follow up on those leads. So there was an automated email that went out, and then what would happen is we'd reach out as soon as we can. But then outside that, we had another cadence which was automated for out of hours. So if someone requested a demo when we're not there, an email went out with a book a meeting link. So the next day, obviously, we're going in and we have meetings already booked for us.
Okay. And what other ways have you sort of changed making sure that every lead counts for you?
Yeah, so the biggest thing I think was the shift in work patterns. So like people are caring for like vulnerable family members, they've got, homeschooling. So we had to adapt the way we're doing outreach. So we had guidance steps. So call in the morning, call in the afternoon to try and make sure we had a balance across that. But then also we changed what channels we used as well to try and test those. And then, yeah, those were driving the different data points, which we then used to get the insights to try and improve pretty much what Alfie's going to come on to later. But yeah, I mean, those are like the key things we tried to do to make sure that we're speaking with.
Did you measure the impact it had of these changes?
Yeah, so we looked at the analytics. We had to make sure that what behavioral changes we were making, what impact that had, to make sure we were driving towards like efficiencies and whatnot.
Good. Okay. And your second learning that you will take forward?
Yeah, I think for like a lot of people last year, focus became like so important. And for us, focusing on where we knew we could win, and then making sure we put the energy and effort there was like a key thing for us. So we focused on kicking off like an outbound account-based strategy. And there were like 2 things we really focused down on, was account identification, and then also building out that orchestrated integrated campaign.
Okay. Talk us through that first step, because it seems a sensible thing to say that we want to find the right accounts to target, but it's not always as easy as we think it could be. So how did you do that? How did you actually work out where you should be spending your time?
Yeah, so like when COVID hit, we obviously changed our ICP like a lot of people did. And what we did was we then pulled together that new target list, and we then segmented the accounts based on the size of opportunity. So we used some assumptions to work out what the size was. And then putting those accounts into different tiers. then allowed us to make sure that we're investing the right time and effort into those accounts, which were either, well, both actually, a good fit, but then also more likely to buy. And then what we then used intent data to overlay onto that. And then also we looked into our CRM, but then also Salesloft, to look for those internal data points to see what we could do to get some prioritization techniques within the business so we can start to prioritize accounts. So there might be like ICP fit score, for example, or engagement data. And actually that project was huge for us because we found 2 or 3 things which have now transformed our go-to-market strategy for 2021 and beyond. So yeah, I think just going beneath the data to really look at what works and what doesn't work is really helpful for us. And then just quickly on the contact piece, because we're approaching Thing as an account, we obviously had numerous contacts we're trying to engage with. So we use like the hot lead functionality and the like to make sure that when people were engaging with the content and the messaging that the sales team or the SDRs were, we were engaged with those contacts.
Great. And I mean, you've come from marketing and sales in your background. Fixflow, you were marketing title, but I know you were involved in sales as well. Yeah. A lot of the terminology you've used has been marketing-led terminology, ABM, etc. Sure. How do you think about and what do you do to make sure that your marketing and sales is aligned in this process when it comes to the personalized outbound activities that you're doing?
Yeah, I think it's starting off the whole project with alignment. So making sure all the key players are involved, putting together a strategy that's a joint strategy between both sales and marketing. And it's not a marketing effort, it's a joint effort from day one. So making sure everyone contributes to it is obviously vital. And then just managing it as a team, don't make it a silo thing, because that's where things often go wrong.
Okay. And you, by being more thorough with what you're doing, and when we spoke before, you mentioned about sort of building more personas. Talk to me about that. I mean, I think lots of companies have thought about how do we build more personas or go for more markets. What was your strategy? Was it to actually divide a persona into further personas or target different personas as well?
Yeah, so originally we only had really 2 personas that we spent a lot of time targeting. And when we kicked off this account-based strategy, we targeted 5 personas. And that was really, really insightful for us because there was one persona at the outcome of really the first campaign that we'd historically really underserved. So yeah, I think looking at those primary personas, but then also introducing maybe secondary personas, which aren't necessarily within the primary decision-making unit, but then are potential referrals in or have insights that can give you the sort of lead into the main players within the decision-making unit.
Fantastic. Alex, thank you very much. Obviously stay on because hopefully we'll have some questions for you at the end. So I'm going to move on to Ellie. So Ellie is an SDR in my team, as I mentioned, came from Forrester and she's been here roughly a year. So Ellie, talk to me about your learnings about the last year. What's the first thing that you've learned in the last year that you will use going forward?
I love that you said 1 year. I think it's around, I wish it was a year, it's around 9 months. The main thing I think for me is all about kind of that continuously improving and developing yourself. And what really impacted my ramp time when I started was having that kind of that library of calls, best practices, all throughout the sales cycle, for me to go and learn from both calls here in EMEA as well as our US colleagues over in America, to get me up and running. So I knew exactly what I should be saying, how I should be saying, when I should be saying it, so I could start booking those calls, booking those initial discovery and having the discovery meetings and ultimately generating revenue, because that's what you need to do, is you need to be up and running straight away to start booking and speaking to people. But I think the other learning for me is that I'm a naturally very, you know this, Ollie, I'm a very big people person. So I like being around people. And when I wasn't in the office, it was quite hard. So every SDR I've spoken to has had to really adapt and use the technology that we have to create that, you know, manager, SDR, mentory experience that we all crave. And I was able to review my calls and meetings with my manager, even though she was based in the US. And I was able to understand what the best looks like. It's basically all about developing so we become the best SDR that we can be.
Okay, and go back to the library of all of these calls that you have access to. I mean, I can understand when you're onboarding, you can do extra stuff to learn from everybody else. What about your taking that forward? How are you going to help use that to help you get to the next level of your career?
I think so. When I speak to a lot of SDRs, especially me as well, everyone is very onboarding and training is so close to our hearts because SDRs want to move into that closing role. They want to be AMs, they want to be AE. I do as well, like I said. So what I've already started doing is reviewing my AE's calls throughout the entire deal cycle and putting them into a library and constantly adding them so that when I'm ready to move into that new role, I have the resources to learn from and become that A player that I want to be. And I think that really helps us to drive success. Having something to mirror, have something to learn from.
Cool. If you were a leader, what would you do to improve the way someone uses these to make it more impactful? I mean, every leader wants to reduce ramp time. So if you were the leader of our SDRs, how would you do that using this?
I think it's making sure that your reps are using it to their full potential, allocating time in their calendar for them to go and review calls and review their own calls and other people's calls. I actually will spend my morning executing all my cadence activity, and there's an hour allocated every Monday, Wednesday, Friday for me to just sit for an hour and develop myself, whether it's listening to one of my amazing AE Misha, his calls, learning how he did some negotiation for myself when I'm ready to move into an AE, or listening to one of my colleagues SDR cold calls and hearing like how they got through gatekeeper training and all stuff like that. It's about dedicating the time. It's all very well having this technology, but it's making sure that you use it to its full potential.
Great, lovely. So tell us your second point that you will move forward with.
So this is my favorite thing about being an SDR, and it's all about this idea of personalization. When we hear personalization is thrown around so much, but it's making sure that your message is relevant to the person you're speaking to, and it's giving them a reason for them to accept that first discovery call. It's all about showing that you've done your research, you know what they care about and what their company cares about, and linking it to how your company can help. If you stopped somebody in the street and you just say, hey, take a meeting with me, they're not going to take a meeting with you. But if you give them a reason for them to speak to you, they're more likely to accept that time with you. I think using personalization is a way to stand out. And what this pandemic has created is it's become very noisy. If we think back to those pre-GDPR days when everyone just used to it was mass email and you could email about, I don't know, 10,000 people at once. That
spam is the word you're looking for.
Yeah, that doesn't resonate anymore. And every single time I have a discovery call, I say to them, why did you accept this call with me? And they said, because you were personalized and you linked it to what I care about, something to do with me. Even if it was me saying, oh, I know your favorite football team and I link it to that. It's about just making sure that it resonates with them. And this is really crucial, especially when you're targeting those tier 1 accounts, because it's worth the time putting in the research and getting to know the right people. I think as well, this whole year has really emphasized how important it is to be relevant online and across all the channels. You can't meet people face to face now. I would love to meet people face to face, but we can't. So it's all about developing those personal relationships online. So what I do is I have the same talk track, whether I'm speaking to them via email, phone, LinkedIn, which is the reason I'm reaching out is, and then X. That's the reason why I'm reaching out. And that's separate to every single person I'm speaking to, and making sure that it's relevant to them.
Cool. I 100% agree, because I do get a cold call. I just got cold call while we were waiting to do this, but I do get cold call a lot. And if someone has watched one of the recent recordings we've done or looked at my post and really understand what I'm about, which is the mental wellbeing and the goodness of sales sort of thing, then they get at least some time with me to talk and pitch it, but they've also got to be very direct and start saying, this is what the call is about. If they don't, I lose interest very quickly because I get approached too much. One question we get asked a lot, and Ellie, I'd love to know your view on this, is how do you sort of put them into buckets? Because there's a challenge that SDRs may spend too much time when it's not worth it. So when you think about tiering and the amount of personalization compared to what tier it's in, what's your strategy of doing that?
Well, I think that's so I have my tier 1 accounts. They're like my golden accounts that I'm constantly wanting to crack into. I'm working on an account plan with my AE to get into them. And then I have my tier 2 and tier 3. Tier 1s, I have read their company reports. I know all of the sales directors, who to be speaking to. My tier 2, tier 3s, I have a more of a nurture cadence where it's the first couple of steps will be personalized, but then it's more that you're delivering value, but a different type of value. It's more on that company level. So I'd say in answer to that, if you've got have about 20 to 30 tier 1s that if you got them meeting, you're going to be popping the champagne, and then you have all the rest are in the tier 2, tier 3. And then that can help you prioritize time as well.
Cool. Final question. Cameron has asked, actually that's 2 questions. For benchmarking, how many prospects do you contact? Let's go with how many day 1 cadences a week, commercial or enterprise, and then how many activities do you tend to do per week? And that's across all channels. Don't break it down. So
for me right now, I'm targeting enterprise, and I'd say that I'm trying to add at least 20 people a day into my cadence. Right now, I'm finding a lot of success on LinkedIn. So I know I'm talking a lot about cadence here, but I will put in LinkedIn steps every other day for me to make sure that I'm interacting with their content and getting to know what they care about, also seeing what they like. I'd say I probably do, I'll send around, I don't know, 100 emails, make 100 calls, and do like 100 LinkedIn steps and in-mails. I've already used all my in-mails this month, so that shows how much I love a bit of LinkedIn. Yeah, so I'd aim for around 20 new people a day.
Cool, thank you. Okay, we're going to move on, hopefully come back to some of the questions. Karen has the second one, but I'm going to come back to that if we can, just in the interest of time. So Ellie, thank you for sharing that. Alfie, good morning to you. Thank you very much for getting out of bed so early to come and join us. So Alfie, tell us what I mean, your role's a bit different at the moment. You're doing a lot of learning. Tell us what the first learning is that you've found this year that you will take forward with you.
Yeah, sure. And good afternoon, everyone. So we're probably all quite familiar with the phrase always be closing. And something that is warm to my heart is always be validating. At the moment, my history, as you said earlier, James, is very much in the beginning stages of a market, launching in the UK and the US. And there's a part of that stage where being in a startup, and I think this applies all the way through scale up, is it's like flying a plane while building it. And to do that, you really need to be able to validate things and never take assumptions. So I think one of the learnings, particularly from 2020, this concept of I need to learn something new, I need to validate information, often only strikes us when something is very black or white. So for example, something completely stops working and you have to rethink your strategy. So that stark contrast, I think, knocked everyone into this always be validating mindset in 2020. But the reality, it was always like that. And we should always be validating new things. The market changes, the ecosystem changes. Once you get to Series B plus kind of company, there are going to be more competitors in your market. And so you should always be having this mindset of, I need to validate something and never take it as a given that this works.
How do you do that in a sales world? How are you doing that in a day-to-day world, would you say, Alfie?
So I think there's probably like 4 or 5 steps that I have here. You do need to have a bit of a process. The first one is to have a beginner's mindset. So a beginner's mindset is assuming that you don't know the answer all the time. Even if you have a hypothesis or an idea as to what you think is correct or not, you should always take the view of, I need to prove this either right or wrong. So that's the first one. The second is to have a very clear objective, whether that be, I'm going to set a hypothesis. So let's give it like a real life example. So at Spendesk, we help finance teams better control, track and bookkeep their company spend. Now, there's different elements of the product that adds value for us. And when the coronavirus hit and everyone went to remote, it was very unclear to us how our ideal customer profiles or the buyer personas were actually, what their priorities were and how they just changed, if at all. So we had ideas. For example, we thought a lot of people were going to be focused on cash flow. We thought a lot of people were going to be focusing more on controlling their spend rather than optimizing manual processes and automating admin things. So that was a hypothesis. That was a very clear objective that we had to validate. And then the third element is you need to track your data. So this goes all the way from, okay, how are your connect rates? What are your reply rates? What's the positive response rates and so on? If you're not tracking the data, then you have no idea whether something's successful or not. Mm-hmm. The fourth element is you have to have a clear point whether it's successful or not. So you need to have an end game. If you don't have an idea of when to stop and when to double down, then you'll just keep going in this kind of loop where you're not really getting anywhere. So you need to very clearly lay out, what am I actually looking for to validate? And then the final part is to be able to implement that feedback, take the learnings, and then give that back to your team.
Okay. And if you look at sort of more the day-to-day role, I mean, you're sort of doing the sales, the outbound activities and stuff. Tell us more around the tech, the tools, and how you use it to actually go through this process. Not the first two stages, but more in the day-to-day aspect of what you're doing. How are you doing that? So, I mean, building cadences, testing them, etc.
Yeah, there's a few different ways, really. So, for example, we want to test messaging, we want to test segment, and those are and channels. I'd say those are the kind of three key things that we want to validate. So, whenever we're testing the segment, we're going to be clearly identifying, okay, who are the list of people that we're going to go after. So, for example, when everyone went remote and there was clearly winners and losers in the 2020 in the whole year, we kind of resegmented the market and said, okay, who are people that are going to be doubling down on this and the value proposition that we focus on, and who are not going to be. We resegment those. We start off having cadences specifically for those segments so that we can then test and track the results of those and then separate them for different segments with different messaging. So that would be number one. Another clear one for us was we wanted to establish which channels and how the channels were going to be operating. So I think the thing that we found out very quickly in Q2 of the year, so when the first quarter of when everything went remote, was LinkedIn was on fire. LinkedIn was our number one lead generator. Everyone gone remote. Everyone was starting to be online. Probably a lot of people wanted to distract themselves from what's going on. And so it's very easy to have conversations with people on LinkedIn. That then evolved and changed into Q3 and Q4 of last year. And then the cold calls became our best channel. So we just really needed to understand and have clear data on which channel was working to help validate our hypotheses as to why that would be the case. And so tools like Salesloft, we have lots of other tools for data tracking and so on and so forth, to have dashboards in Salesforce and integrate there where we can keep an eye on these things.
Cool. Okay. What's your second point?
So the second one is all about coaching. So I think, Ellie, you kind of talked on a few topics here. But the key learning is when everyone went remote, there is no more water cooler chat. And actually in a company, that is a key element of where learning and knowledge is actually shared. In my previous company I worked at, Bloomberg, they built a new office and the whole entire office was designed around stimulating serendipitous interactions. And that pretty much doesn't really happen when you're online. There is no serendipitous interaction. It's very proactive and intentional. So we needed to fix that. We needed to find a way to find actionable insights that we could then help coach people and also create these interactions within the team, not just so that a manager can coach an employee in the team, but also so people can coach each other. So one of the ways that we did this was really with call recordings. So we record all of our calls. But we also would select calls and take snippets out of calls. This was really helpful for identifying actual insights to actually coach on, but actually scaling out that knowledge. So, for example, when you're on a sales floor and you're hearing calls and you're hearing objection handling or maybe a particular way of positioning something, we don't realize how much of that we learn through osmosis. But being able to take these call recordings, take snippets and then share them throughout Slack and emails and wins of the week and things like this, that really helped replace and actually scale up that, because it meant that it wouldn't just happen to the person that was sitting next to you in the office, but it would be shared with everyone across the company.
Agreed. I think that it's when I was a salesperson, I know that all I did was just take the best bits from everybody else, and it's so impactful. But also I think also for a manager, being able to not have to be on everyone's calls but watch bits afterwards, it makes a big difference to that. So tell us more about that, Alfie. I mean, what have you and the rest of the leaders in regards to the coaching of people? How do you now coach compared to how you did before?
Yeah, I think previously it was a lot easier to kind of be aware on a kind of call-to-call basis, just what's going on in the office. You can pick up on things that need improving on just by being present on the sales floor. And that's very difficult. I think now I take a much more macro approach to coaching and start with an objective at the top and then work the way down and find the data to be able to help guide that. Maybe to give a very specific example, with improving our meetings booked. So as I said, one of the channels that was working really well for us was cold calls. And so cold calls are working for us really well. We were booking at least one meeting per 100 dials and more, but we needed to get more stability in the numbers, and they kept fluctuating. And so we realized that there was two variables that we could control, either the connect rate or the conversion rate once someone had connected. Now, we were already doing pretty well on the conversion rate, and we realized that to go from, say, a 10% to a 30% conversion on the call is going to be a long-term fix. That's a lot of coaching, that's lots of one-to-ones, that's a lot of skill, upskilling. Whereas connect rates go from, say, 5% to 10%, that's a 2x in connect rates. That can 2x your meetings booked just by connect rate. So again, we use tools like Salesloft looking at data to identify specifically when were the ideal times to call people. Again, when people went remote, that completely changed because habits changed. And so that was really powerful. So we could literally 2x meetings booked with no extra effort, but just by being smart on data.
Cool. Okay. Thank you, Alfie. You can go back to bed now. No, I'm joking. Stay for questions. So before I hand over to James for his learning, I also want to find out James's learning. One thing I'd love to say about before I do ask him to speak is well done. Because I think this year, if there's one industry I would not want to be in, it's what James does. And for him to continue throughout this and be resilient to what was happening, and to be able to arrange today where we've got over 180 people currently online listening to this conversation because of the Sales Confidence brand. So first of all, well done and thank you, James. But tell us about your learning. You've had a challenging year, to say the least. We've kept in contact, but you've done so we can probably learn a hell of a lot from what you've done in this last year. Tell us about it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It's great to be on the receiving end on a panel and not having to host for once. So great job, Ollie. And I would just definitely share, everybody had a different context last year and a different experience of the challenges. So, even things were going really well in your company, especially in the technology space, that we are in this bubble, you still had other challenges to manage. And naturally, as you highlighted, as an events business owner, it was the most difficult year for me personally and professionally. And I actually reflected over Christmas on the year. And one of the things that I was proud of, and that we should all be proud of, is that we made it through. We made it through the year. So when I thought back about the anxieties, some difficult depressive episodes, when I was really struggling to get motivated, because I was focused on outcomes, I still had certain goals I wanted to achieve. And especially as sales, revenue, marketing professionals, we're very outcome driven. We're very driven by the targets. And I think what I realized is actually there has to be a lot more in that day-to-day process. The targets, what we learned, and Alfie mentioned it, everything changed last year. And even this year, things are changing. It's still difficult in many ways. So when you're thinking about building out cadences, as Ellie mentioned, there needs to be some joy and finding small wins in getting responses to those cadences versus, I said I was going to book 10 meetings this week and I only hit 8. You're going to get really down about it. You can't be attached to those outcomes as much as I think we are. And I think we have to be adapted to that. So if I kind of summarize my experience, There's so much more I could say about the support of people. But what I would say is just to focus on the day-to-day process and don't be too thrown off until you have got to that point, the end of the year, the end of the month, the end of the quarter, when you can step back and reflect. Because if you get anxiety build up because you're worried you're on the first day of the month, how are you going to get that target? You're never going to get that process through day to day. And overall, we've all learned, however difficult something was last year, and it will still be difficult, we will always get through it. And I think that's a confidence boost on reflection to say that we will get through this, and we do. Just enjoy the wins along the way in the process a bit more.
So, James, you were in frontline sales before. We worked together at LinkedIn. Talking about concentrate on the process, not the outcomes. How did you do that as a salesperson, or how should salespeople be doing that? Because I completely agree with you, and I have this conversation with my SDRs, my AEs, to say, look, I mean, the process is, we know what the process needs to do, and if you're hitting your process, you'll hit the outcomes. Just rely on that. How should salespeople learn from that?
That's a great question, and I think it's really very, very relevant while we're working remotely and by ourselves. Often the overall outcome we're driving is to get those total meetings booked, or create that total number of opportunities, or close that total overall business. And people know me as being quite excitable. I generally like to play games in terms of setting myself small wins each day. Like, I actually believe I personally, as a salesperson, try and find the most excitement in the small win. When actually someone decides to give you that extra 30 seconds and you wipe your brow on that cold call, you're like, I've got it. Like, they're the ones you need to celebrate because they're the ones you have to keep repeating. And I just think about times, especially those enterprise reps that, or the SDRs supporting the enterprise, you're navigating these large accounts, you're multi-threading, and there's a target of a professional. But you've managed to get that guy who isn't the most senior, give you that referral. That was the small win before the outcome of getting to the main decision maker. So what I've got a lot better is celebrating, and I did in the past, like those wins, those daily targets, but not even the target outcome, just like the enjoyment in the process of what's happening each day. And I think there's something to be said to stand up. So a lot of us sit down remotely, right? I think if something good, small to you, you don't have to put it on Slack to tell everybody happens. But actually stand up and just enjoy it for a moment for yourself, because you'll get a lot more from your day if you do that.
Thank you, James. Okay. So thank you for the 7 points we've heard. We are going to move towards questions. One thing that came to mind while James was talking, I think that most people's biggest learnings this year, or I'm hoping one of people's biggest learnings, is around gratitude, because it's very easy to go, yeah, things are crap or anything like that. But chances are, when I spoke to my wife recently, we're grateful that we have jobs. So there's a lot to be grateful for. And I think that one of the positive outcomes of this, hopefully, is that people do have some gratitude for what they have, rather than always looking on the negative side, because there's always something to be grateful for. So that's purely my 10 cents there. So I'm going to go to some questions here. I'm going to start with Simon from a company called Wellity, who around mental wellbeing. That's why I promote it. So Simon says, many salespeople rely on team environments for your motivation and morale. How has the remote way of working affected this? Alfie, do you want to start off on that?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I definitely think that the remote environment requires people to be very self-motivated. And I think that you have to dig down and discover yourself a bit more and understand what motivates you, rather than just an environment. I think the points that you were saying, James, were really powerful, actually. Finding the small wins in the day and understanding what you really like. I think one of the things that this whole experience has done for me is I spent a lot of time with introspection, understanding myself. What is it that really gets me fired up? And for example, in my day, I made an audit. This was just kind of throughout the year in 2020, of all the tasks in the day that I really enjoyed doing. and all of the things that I didn't enjoy doing, and really understanding, okay, there's a lot of things in here that I didn't really think of, but I get a lot of joy and pleasure from. And a lot of that was around coaching, helping people progress. And it was always in those little wins rather than the big macro ones. So, be self-motivated, but a big part of that is to really understand what you actually enjoy in the process, and then allocating time to make sure you focus on that.
Good answer. I'm going to go to Ellie, because it's tell us from an SDR point of view how you feel that we've adapted, or what you have needed, etc.
So, I mean, if anyone knows our Salesloft team in EMEA, we're very close. Ollie's built an incredible culture with us. And when I first started, was just starting to settle into this culture, getting to know people. And then it was like, okay, you're now from home. And one way we really helped drive motivation is by I would have these like coffee sessions with people in my team where we wouldn't talk about work. We would just sit and have a chat and get to know each other. Our team has grown so much in the last year. I think more people have started out during the pandemic than before the pandemic. And we have this joke in our team that we don't know how tall anyone is because we haven't actually met each other. So it's all about just taking work.
Or if we wear trousers.
Or if you wear trousers. But it's all about putting work aside and getting to know each other on a personal level. For me, specifically in the SDR team, sometimes what I'll do is we'll pull up our cameras and we'll sit on Zoom and we'll just be working and chatting away to each other, doing our cadence steps as if we're sitting next to each other in the office, to try and create that experience of, okay, we're about to go and do some cold calls, let's do it, let's send some emails. One thing that I can't live without is Slack, because we have an EMEA SDR Slack group where we're constantly trying to get advice on how to deal with specific things. That's some of the ways we've adapted.
Cool. And we've also put stand-ups in 3 times a week, drinks on a Friday. Alex, tell us your thoughts. What do you? How has remote working affected how you boost morale and motivation?
I think, like sort of Ellie, we our new team kicked off last year as we went into COVID. So we'd literally just finished doing the training, and that first week we had to hit the phones when we went remote. So it was amazing. I think. Yeah, definitely what Alfie was saying around mindset and what James said is really important. But then also I think it's what's happened over COVID is that blend between professional and personal is really sort of dissolved. And you really, like, for me as a manager, I've learned so much about the people I work with, so much more, not just about them as an individual and as a person, but also about what drives them, which really comes onto what you were saying, Alfie, about what drives you. I think the onus is then on the manager to be aware of that and really bring that to the forefront so people are engaged. But yeah, it's been a real tough year for sure.
I agree. I think making it sure not everything's around work is a great point. James, I know you work on your own, and you have done for a bit, but your thoughts, what have you seen from other companies and stuff to help them keep the culture alive and motivate people?
Yeah, well, naturally, the great thing about this role is that I had hundreds of conversations with sales leaders and salespeople last year. And I think the point's been made. I think there's a much greater awareness and empathy and humility of what I would call more traditional leaders that maybe wouldn't engage in an emotionally intelligent way in actually creating a safe space for people to understand what's happening in individual team members' worlds. And while there's people like Ollie, who's a great advocate of that, what I actually saw from one-to-one conversations behind the scenes is a lot of leaders, which I wouldn't talk about that publicly, wouldn't bring that up, would definitely acknowledging how much more space they needed to create to give people time to let them know that what was going on personally. The other thing is, I just think, as we know, when we turn up to these professional calls, and some of us have done our hair, we put a face on, right, depending on the professional context. And I think it's really important to have little tribes, even if it's mates that aren't in your company or in your industry that you can just let loose, or, you know, peers in another company that you can let loose. Because I know, you know, having worked for a company and encouraged people that were part of my business, that there's often Kool-Aid, you know, like, we're all here, it's great at remote, isn't it? Yeah. And then you get off the phone and you're just like, oh, you know, another remote call. And I just think sometimes you can't really speak the truth, you know, to your direct team. It's good to have people in other businesses, or even, you know, when we get to the networking here, just to be like, yeah, it wasn't that great last week, you know, or we're having the difficulty of getting things done. So I just think, you know, honesty, authenticity, and leaders particularly, again, ones that haven't been public, just creating more time to listen and understand beyond the target, beyond the number, beyond performance.
Agreed. Thank you. So a question from Alex. Now, your answer's got to begin with S and end in T. What sales software tools could you not live without? I'm joking. You go with your top 2 or 3. What sales software tools could you not live without? Sorry, I'm sorry. I forgot I'm asking people. Alex, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, Salesforce obviously as a starter, Salesloft, and tough one on the third. I think Chili Piper was really powerful for us as well. So yeah, they're my top 3.
Alfie?
Yeah, I mean, I've got to second that. We've got the powerful combination of Salesloft with Salesforce, particularly on the reporting and data side, like you said right at the beginning, Ollie. That's a big part of our process, getting insights. And then on the prospecting side, we're a big fan of Vidyard here and the integrations and being able to use video throughout the entire sales process, from prospecting to following up. Account executives use it, customer success, it's used everywhere.
Cool. Ellie, you're not allowed to say Salesloft because you love the company, you work here. Give us 3 tools you would can't do without, not including Salesloft.
I mean, I do love Salesloft. No, if anyone knows me, knows how much I love video prospecting. So I could not live without Vidyard. I think it's one of the best tools out there to personalize your prospecting. The second is LinkedIn. I think during this year, I've seen so many more people start posting content on LinkedIn, but the ones that really stands out is when it's your own content and you're putting your own voice to out there. I think that's great. And also LinkedIn is great to connect with people. I'd like to describe it as, imagine all your prospects in a room together and you're just going around handing out your business card. That's what I see LinkedIn as. And then the last one is probably Slack, to kind of create that office morale that we currently don't have.
James, I'm going to change the question slightly for you because you are very knowledgeable about the tech space. What sales tech would you suggest people look at that maybe haven't been mentioned or even are up and coming that people may not know of?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think fundamentally we're on the phone and driving conversations. So I think making sure that you've got a really robust online VoIP phone system. You know, we've been working with AirCall for the last year. Something that's easy to set up and just works, I think is worth looking into. And I think you need to challenge your IT infrastructure to look at the latest VoIP technology that's going to be able to integrate with the call coaching software that's been mentioned, because it's just so fundamental to driving sales and success. And the other thing is, everyone's needed this, is just getting accurate emails and accurate phone numbers. So Cognizant would be a UK business in the UK for just making sure that you're enriching your sales force with the most up-to-date data. And then, you know, naturally, I would just say LinkedIn is transformed. You know, obviously we think back, Ollie, to when we worked then it first started. I just think so many people are missing a trick still, and video and audio notes, and, like, you know, watch people like Ellie and how they're doing it. It takes a bit of a barrier to get over it, but for me, that personalization from a video and audio note, it still throws me off when someone drops me an audio and I'm like, oh, cool, thanks for doing that. So, you know, that would be the other recommendation.
Mine that hasn't been mentioned would be Reachdesk. I think that we've spoken about standing out, making sure that you're remembered and all of these kind of things. And something like Reachdesk sort of gifting throughout the sales process and building that into your cadences can differentiate. I love getting a meal voucher. I love eating, basically. So when I get those, it's good, and they use them very well. So Reach Desk would be mine. I'm going to go for one more question because of the time, if that's all right. Hopefully people can stay on for one more question. This is coming from Chris Hatfield. So what's one new thing you would suggest reps, stroke managers try this year to help with their development stroke performance? I'm assuming he means their own development stroke performance as a manager. What should a manager try this year to help with their own, or reps and managers to help with their own development stroke performance? Who wants to go first?
I think I can go. Yeah, there's I was speaking about this just the other day. I'd say everyone should read the book called Now Discover Your Strengths. It's a really great book, which it talks about the difference between talent and skill. The idea that talent, everyone has our own innate talents, but that doesn't lead to a skill unless you hone it and work on it. But like I said earlier, in terms of doing an audit first, it really helps you do the audit of what are you talented at naturally, and therefore how should you build and develop your career around. Really powerful book that my manager recommended to me, changed my thought process on my career.
Thank you. Alex?
It's not, it's a slightly different answer to the question, but I think because of what's gone on, we're now all remote, it's really working with the team to build out a playbook. And I think what comes from that is better alignment, better understanding, sharing best practices and everything along the line. So yeah, I would say it's probably looking at building best practice within the business through a playbook would be my suggestion, because a lot of good things come from that.
Thank you. Ellie?
I think it's understanding where you want to go, obviously from an SDR point of view, and working with your manager on how you can get there and the skills you can do to get there. One thing that I've started doing, and obviously we're not traveling anymore, we haven't got that train hour to sit, or I sit on it for an hour, 2 hours a day. So I'm trying to use that as time for me to develop into where I want to go. And also utilizing mentors that are outside of your company. If you want a mentor, I've done this before. I've reached out to people even reached out to me and asked me to be their mentors. Having someone external that you can ask questions to and they'll help you steer your journey in this crazy sales world.
Cool. James?
Cool. So I would just kind of reiterate Ellie's point on kind of seeking mentors outside of your organization. I think what we've tried to do, and just to make a point, so even though the content of this event will be wrapped up in the next 5 minutes, I'll keep the event going for half an hour for anybody that wants to join the networking on the right, because that's a point for me. It's like making those new contacts and new conversations. There's over 150 people standing and staying on here. So how can you seek out other people outside your organization and encourage them to support you with advice, and I guess offer them something that you can help them with in return in terms of introductions or connections. But you'll be surprised how much goodwill there is out there, because not enough people reach out and ask people to mentor them.
My thoughts on the question, just very briefly, is around making sure that as a manager you're also taking the time off to actually look after your mental well-being. It's very easy as a manager because you're answerable to so many people, upwards, downwards, wherever, that you've got a lot to do. So to actually make sure you're taking the time out, and it's very hard to be easy to be still sat at your laptop at 7 o'clock in the evening just doing a few more things. So I am going to do one thing which I normally do when I'm in the pub. I'm going to say, let's just have one more. So there's a question here from George Monk. Also, Megan wanted to know the answer to this because there's 2 people wanting it. So any advice on remote cold calling for a brand new SDR who's never had the opportunity to experience the buzz of the sales floor?
I've got an answer to this, if I may. My first sales role was door to door, knocking on doors, persuading people to get their milk delivered, which was very difficult when everyone had access, even then, to Sainsbury's, Tesco's, and whatever your preferred brand of shopping is. But we had this amazing, really robust sales guy that repeated this process every day, and basically was using crosses and ticks. So this is super simple, but I think it's, even now I can get back on this. It's literally every time, you have a dial, it's a cross, right? And then when you get a connect, it's a tick. And what that starts to do is you just start to enjoy the crosses, because you're like, the more crosses I get, you'll get a tick. So despite we've all got access to this analytical technology, when you're first starting out and you're really nervous, just cross, tick for the small win is a really good way to look at your day and feel like you've put some effort into it. That would be my
I started with 2 years door-to-door sales as well, and you literally got given 100 doors, and you knew the ratio was normally about 1 in 10. So every cross was a step closer to a yes, and it is motivating. If you're up to 85, you've got 15 left, you know there's some yeses there. Cool. Ellie, how would you advise somebody?
I know I did write a little comment on there just about kind of getting your team all together on a Zoom, muting yourself and all just calling at the same time to create that buzz. And then afterwards reviewing what you learned and the success. My second thing is creating a playlist on Spotify that is going to get you in the mood to call, because there's been so many times when I've come into this office and I'm like, oh my gosh, I have 25 cold calls to make. Can be quite daunting listening to a song that's going to pump you up. And also the third thing is enjoy it. We're working remote. We're not speaking to anyone. You have the opportunity to call people and speak to them. So enjoy it.
Random people. It's called anyone, random.
But yeah, enjoy the fact that you're speaking to people.
Cool. Concentrate on the process, not the outcome. I like it. Alex.
Yeah, we used to do like once COVID hit, we'd do like a call session amongst the whole team, sort of like what Ellie's saying. And we'd have, once someone made a connect, we'd all jump in and listen into that call and then share what worked well, what we could have done better, and use it as a coaching opportunity. But then also it created a sense of, energy. And yeah, it's not replicating what you get in the office, but it nearly enough gets there,
Cool. Alfie?
Yeah, we didn't have the live jump-ins on the calls where we are, but we do have a Slack channel where we share our best and favourite funny cold calls. So we've all had some horrendous cold calls, connects and hang-ups, and we've got some pretty bad stories. But we share those in a channel. But that's also great because it also shows other people outside of sales what it's like to receive or handle a very bad cold call, and that gets a lot of laughs and shares a lot of banter.
Fantastic. Guys, thank you so much, Alex, Alfie, James, Ellie. James, it's been interesting turning the tables a little bit. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone that's come along as well. Really appreciate you staying on. The engagement has been great. But James, over to you. But thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much, and thank you everybody for getting stuck in today. As I said, I'm hopeful that this will work. If you look under the stage, there's a networking window, and if you click onto that, I hopefully can keep the event running additional half an hour for those of you that want to catch up in the background if there's still time. Kelly mentioned that there's actually a poll as well, so I'm sure a lot of you came here today wanting to understand a bit more about Salesloft. So if you're looking for a specific Salesloft demonstration, you can click the poll next to the chat and type in yes, and that will share your details with us and the team, and that will be followed up with. Make sure you connect with everybody on LinkedIn, and we will send the recording so you can share it with your team if there's something specific. Just to highlight from a sales confidence and Salesloft perspective, we're running events this year to support the individual contributor, the SDR, newly launched SDR manager, and also sales leaders. So typically they're at 4 o'clock on a Wednesday. There'll be speakers that have 7 minutes to deliver value. And I'll drop the link for our sales and revenue leaders event, which is happening on the 20th with some world-class speakers. So really, I guess it's a round of applause to our guests. Thank you, Alex King, Alfie Marsh, Ellie Twigger. And I think hats off to Ollie Sharpe, who delivered as a great host today and made a great experience for me. Thank you for Kelly behind the scenes and for pulling all this together. And also just thank you for each of you for committing and engaging. It'd be great, maybe if you can catch a screenshot now. So I'll do one. If we can all put a smile on the face and let people know that you've been on today, that'd be good. Here we go. And then if you can just let everybody know on LinkedIn that you've had a great time, and we'll get you involved in future events. So if you want to stay for the networking, click the networking. I'm going to be there for half an hour, so maybe we can have a chat. But I think that's a wrap, isn't it, guys, for the content?
Thank you.
Cool.
Everyone, Happy New Year.